here to ask a few questions of Kevin and learn a little bit more about his practice and a little bit more about his experience here as the writer in residence. And yeah, just quickly, like a huge thank you to Jael for being here, and a huge congratulations on 10 years of the Fold. It's such a gem in Brampton. I think we're so lucky to have it in our city. So congratulations and a big thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me, everybody. So exciting to be in the library. I really believe, I just posted, I think libraries are kind of magical, and I've had the honor of the last 2 nights, and tomorrow will be 3 nights in a row in a library doing events and conversations, and it's really a pleasure to be here. As a Bramptonian, I'm really just happy to hang out with my friend, Kevin, and ask some questions, and then I think we open it up for your questions at the end. So as we're going through, if there's things that you're curious about, I love treating these conversations like we're at the dinner table. You know, it's going to be Kevin and I first, and then we're going to make the table a little bit wider, and we'll have some questions from all of you. Okay, so my first question, I wanted to start with a little bit about you, about why you became a writer and what you saw in the profession of writing that made you want to pursue it.
Okay, so 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh, we're off. But
Oh, we just got new batteries.
You use this one. I only speak randomly on occasion, so I'll just shout really loud and Kevin will have my
Okay, so how I became a writer, or why I became a writer, it's kind of my father's fault. So he didn't intend for me to become a writer. He intended for me to become a reader. And reading was the last thing that I wanted to do. I hated reading. I love sports, and that's all I wanted to do, go outside and play. But he wanted me to read. So he would give me books that I didn't want to read, I had no interest in, and he would sit there, or he would stand above me, and he had, like my father, he had this really thick belt, like really, really thick belt with a giant buckle. And so, I think some of you had a parent with that kind of a belt. So, me and my sister would always know he's coming home because you can hear him clink, clink, clink. You hear that belt clinging. So he's standing above me, wrapped the belt around his hand, and he said, listen, you're going to read this book. You have an hour, right? Read as much as you can and write your report. I'll go downstairs and I'll be back. So he goes downstairs, and of course, then clink, 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 goes down. So I still don't want to read it. I'm being very stubborn. And instead of reading, I'm going through it and I'm picking out cities, names of people, and then I just started making things up, right? And every time he gave me a book, I would do the same thing. He would come up the stairs and hear clink, 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 him coming up the stairs, and then I would be ready. I was always ready. So I don't know to this day he ever knew, but I never told him. But that's really how I started writing. That's how I became creative in that way. And so I've always loved to write stories from that time. When I became maybe in my early 20s, I realized that I had maybe a gift for it, because I would give stories to my friends and hey, read this. They're like, whoa, that's cool, right? And so I was getting positive feedback, and that was giving me more confidence. And so when I actually told my parents, I think I want to do some writing, I think I want to become a writer, go to school for writing, they're like, what kind of job you want to get as a writer? I'm like, okay, maybe I'll go into journalism. Then you're writing still, I'm still writing. It's just not as creative. But I took journalism, I graduated, and then I realized that while I was freelancing magazines and freelancing newspapers, that I didn't really like that hustle and bustle of newspapers, right? I didn't like the newsroom, right? But I still wanted to be creative in writing, so I really got more into poetry, and then that's kind of where things started to burst open, and I realized that there's opportunity for me as a writer.
My questions are going to be short, and then your answers are going to be long and delightful. So one of my questions, when you're a writer, you've self-published, you've traditionally published, as we say, and then you see this opportunity for a writer in residence at the Brampton Library. What made you want to take on this role?
Wow. I saw it on social media first, and I'm not a very social media person. I'm getting more into it now, but like very far few in between that I see stuff, and so that just caught me right away, and I was like, oh, writing a resident. I was like, I could have done this before. I've done it in schools where I was in the school for a number of weeks, and I was the resident in the school, resident writer in the school. I was like, this kind of seems like the same thing. I was like, why not? I should just apply, right? And let me just see. And I said, if chosen, great. If not, then, I'll find another opportunity. So when I actually thought about the opportunity, I was thinking about what I would do, what I could do. And I said, well, I know I can write, I can do workshops, because I've done workshops for students many times before. And I could talk about my experiences. So I knew that alone would be enough to help people, help young writers, emerging writers along their way. Because I know that I needed a mentor, right? I had George Eliot Clark. He was my mentor. When I met him at a poetry show, and I said, let me just talk to him. I know who he is. Let me just introduce myself. And then he's like, yeah, come. I'll give you my phone number. We talk. And then he would tell me to come to his class sometime. So I needed that. I needed someone to kind of reinforce what I knew about myself. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, if not a mentor, I just wanted to be someone that they could bounce ideas off of, that they could feel confident with. Because it's very hard to share your work, right? Most people are writing in their bedrooms. They're writing under their bed. They're writing in, very private places, so they don't share it with anyone. And so I wanted to at least be that person they could share with, at least feel comfortable enough to share their work, and then we'll see what happens with that. Maybe, they become the great writer.
That's so cool. I don't know how many of you know, but this was the first time that we've had, well, in this program, we sort of talked about that at the beginning. In my time in Brampton, it's the first time that we've had a writer in residence, and it was really exciting because it was the Brampton Library, BOW, and Fold that all got to partner together. And I think it's our first time all working on one project together, which was really fun. I wanted to ask you how you felt during this residency, whether you felt like the expert you're supposed to be, or whether there's moments where you're sort of sitting across from someone and you're like, I don't know if I even have the answer to that question.
Yeah, that happened a few times where I know I didn't have the answer, but I knew I'm not going to try to, pretend, right? Because people will see through that. So it's okay. I know it's okay to say you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I was an expert with the things that I knew, and I passed that information on. And the things that I didn't know, we tried to figure it out together, right? And so in that way, we both got something out of it. And I feel like in speaking with so many emerging writers and so many passionate people about literature, I got inspired from it too, right? So it was a two-way street. And I don't think they realize how much they inspired me, right? Even in the workshops where, maybe they don't talk as much, they're just more listening, but I can just feel the energy, right? I think it's always a conversation back and forth, right? When I'm on stage performing, I always feel the energy back and forth. And the same thing when I was doing the workshops, I feel the energy. I can feel them absorbing it. I can feel them emanating, it's almost like I can feel their ideas, I start to see their ideas poking through their pores, and right, that things are happening within their selves, their writing selves. So I was really excited for that. So yeah, sometimes I felt like an expert, and sometimes, I didn't have to.
Was there a particular moment that you might share where you were like, this is what I'm going to remember about this opportunity and experience, or a moment where you were sort of taken aback by like the impact you were having or the impact people had on you?
Yeah. The first time I felt that, it was a young girl and her father came in. She was in grade 6, and she came through with a full novel. She writes horror. Right? She writes horror. It's a horror novel that she brought to me, and she said, I don't know what to do with this, but I've written it. I don't know what happens next. And I was like, I don't know either. Let me get a read of it. Let me see. So I read through it. She's very good, very expressive. And I was very surprised at what I read. Grade 6, I was not doing that, right? So that was one of the peak moments for me. And seeing that just seeing her fervor, how excited she was for writing at such a young age, I was really inspired by that. So that moment really stuck out to me. I'm really happy to have been in the program specifically for that moment. And then another time, we had someone dropped in, they didn't register, and he came in, he just kind of was like walking up and down the aisles, and then he saw the room was empty, and he just kind of slipped in and sat in the chair. I was like, oh, okay. He says, I'm not really a writer, but I like to write, and I just wanted to see what's going on here. I passed by here, I think he said 3 or 4 times. So he's been maybe working up the nerve to come and talk about his writing. And he had taken some courses, and he had written some short stories, and we talked about it, and just seeing how excited he was to finally speak to someone that he can trust about his writing and get feedback. That was another moment that really stood out to me, right? So it's that trust factor.
I'm curious in this room, how many of you, I'm going to say, are writers? And by that I mean someone who writes. You have books where you're either writing stories or poems, or you have a memoir that you just type away on your phone. Yep. I wanted to take that moment because I think for a lot of us, we're unsure whether that term applies to us. We're unsure when that term starts to apply to us. And I think it's really exciting to hear these moments where people are finding that, realizing when you write stories, whether it's in your journal or on your computer, or I type my first drafts often on my phone while I'm waiting for my son to come out of practice or something, that is what makes us writers. And whether you become a poet or an author or whatever the further thing is, that first acknowledgement that you're a writer is really powerful. And I think it's really exciting that so many people got that through the program. I wanted to ask a messy question, and it was about, feedback. So often in these experiences, you're getting writing of various levels, and you're asked to give feedback. How honest were you with your feedback? You're seeing all different types. People are like just getting started. How honest were you able to be? Did you feel sometimes like you were holding back, or did you just let it all out?
No, I was pretty honest. I mean, if someone's manuscript needed a lot of work, I wouldn't tell them that it's garbage, no. Right? I'm trying to be encouraging, right? And that's always been taught. Like when you're critiquing someone's work and someone's trusting you with their read, the first thing you should say is not something negative. You find the positive in it first. And there's always going to be something positive in it, right? And so once you've found that, then now you can get into, well, you know what, I'm confused by this line. What did you mean by this? And I ask a lot of questions, right? So I don't tell them that what they're doing is wrong. I want them to tell me what they want, what's supposed to be right, right? And then when I hear it, I say, okay, you know what? Yes, I get what you want to say. Maybe you can say it like this, or maybe you can insert this, or take this out, right? So it becomes more of a conversation, and I think it's more about the self-discovery, right? Not me telling you how to do your work, but you figuring it out, right? By me asking you questions. I'm doing an interview pretty much with everyone I spoke to, right? So they can figure out for themselves what they need and how to make their work better. And so, yeah, it's not really that messy, right? It's not really that messy, but it is a conversation back and forth. And I think that we all need someone to read our work, right? We all need a little constructive criticism, and we all need that boost of confidence when speaking to someone, right? And make sure you speak to the right person, because you don't want to speak to that person who's going to tell you this is terrible, right? That's not encouraging, right? So make sure you're sharing your work with someone that you trust, right? That's the one thing I would say.
I think you said it's not messy. I mean, it can get messy.
Yeah.
People push back. Did you get any resistance? Do you have any hot tea and gossip from this role that you're willing to share with us in this very public setting?
No real pushback. Questions, like I could tell, because we as writers, when we think we have written something so fantastic, we might have written a scene and we think it's the greatest thing in the world. And sometimes it doesn't fit the project that you're working on, right? And so it's hard to to pull it out, but you have to sometimes pull those teeth out, because the teeth are rotting the rest of them out. So that tooth has to come out, right? And so that's the way I kind of explain, that's the way I look at it. And yeah, I didn't have any arguments, thank goodness. Right? I didn't have to protect myself, but I think I can handle myself anyway. But I do welcome debate, right? And I think it's fair. And I think when it comes to your work, I have experiences with editors editors and traditional publishing editors, and they're going to suggest things to you, or they suggested things to me that I didn't like, and you don't have to stand for it. So you're allowed to push back, right? And that's something you should feel empowered by. It's your writing, these are your words, and if you feel really convicted about something, you should fight for it, right? But make sure that it's worth fighting for, and make sure that it's going to be a good part of your story. Otherwise, then the editors are kind of right. They have a lot of experience, they know what's going on, and you probably should trust them, but if you're that convicted about something, fight for it.
Was there anything that you would have done differently in the role? Anything you would have added? Any sort of thoughts about having lived through it in this iteration of Fold in the library that you would change or modify?
Yeah, I would like.
No pressure because we're all here watching this together.
I would have liked for it to be longer, definitely. 2 months was good, but I feel like we really got started probably after a month, maybe 3 weeks in. I think things really, really got started. And when things really got started, things were finishing. Right? So that was I was a little sad about that. So I wish it was a longer term. Let me see what else. I wish we had a way of bringing the writers together a little bit more often. Maybe another kind of fun program we could have done, or a fun workshop where we're doing all hands-on writing and working with each other. I think the community, bringing the community, writing community that way, would have been a great benefit. And a lot of the writers were asking me that, so do we get a chance to have a reading circle or something? I was like, we don't have that planned, but that's a really good idea, right? So I think those are things I would like to see in the program going forward.
That's a really cool idea. I mean, one of the things, I went on a writer's retreat once in Saskatchewan, and we worked on our projects, and the last day, everybody read 2 minutes of their own writing. So you got to see sort of the culmination of the time. So maybe even at something like this, having some of the writers that you worked with, even if it's just a small selection, read as well, might feel like the project has an ending. You're going to all perform this piece or something. One of the things I wanted to ask about, because Fold starts on Sunday, is the Festival of Literary Diversity. We're going into our 10th year, and in this 10th year, and over the last 4 years, the festival is half virtual and half in-person at Brampton. So the first 4 days, everybody's virtual. The authors are virtual, the staff are virtual, the conversations, the trivias, the after parties are all in a virtual space. Did you do some of your events virtual, or was it all in person?
No, we did both. So, yeah, both. It was about half and half. I had 2 days allotted for personal, in person, and 2 days allotted for virtual. Okay. So we did both, yeah.
And what did you find about virtual that worked, that's more difficult, better? Yeah.
Virtual had its challenges, just trying to make sure we're logged on, right? Complications that way. But once we got through, I think it really went well, because now it's one-on-one now. You're looking face to face, and you're actually even closer to the person's face than you would be if you were sitting across from them. And so I feel like that with some of the writers virtually, I think they were more comfortable to talk, because maybe they're in their home setting. They had no pressure. They were just comfortable. And so I felt those conversations they started a little easier and started quicker. We got deeper quicker, I should say. Whereas here, I think I had more control of the conversation, and I had to kind of steer it and ask them questions, right? So they weren't as talkative, I should say. The virtual people were very talkative, right? So I think that's the difference. Yeah, but I guess that's just the level of comfort being at home.
That's super interesting that the conversations were easier. I'm really excited by virtual events and virtual opportunities, because I think it's the most accessible way to help everyone. So I'm always glad when that's built in and that's part of it. And I think figuring out the nuances, what works and what doesn't, is just like in person. You just kind of mastered being in person, and now it's time to kind of master what it looks like to be virtual. So I'm so glad that was a part of it, that you found it was really good gems from it. I wanted to turn into some questions about your writing and you, and where you're headed next. Because I've seen you do a whole bunch of different things. Were you in T.Dot Griot's The Anthology? Is that where we first met?
Yes.
So so there was an anthology that my sister-in-law actually edited. It was the first piece of writing I ever got published, and Kevin was in there, and I think that's when we met. And you've done so many different things. I've mentioned your poetry books and now traditionally published books as well. What is next for you? What are you thinking now about?
I want to learn how to write scripts. I always loved theater. So my favorite author growing up was Amiri Baraka, and I loved his plays, and I loved plays. But I wrote plays as a kid, but I never wrote a play as an adult. So I want to kind of get back into that, writing plays and writing scripts, because I love that genre. I love that way of expressing art. And then I love auditory art. I love spoken word poetry, something I love very much. And so I heard a quote from Austin Clarke, and he talked about the importance, or how important it is that the written word be heard aloud. He says anything that's been written on paper is good enough to be heard by the ear. And when I heard that, I was like, that's right, that's good. And so I was very proud to keep doing poetry with that in mind. And so now what I want to do, I want to take my prose and read it aloud. So I want to become a narrator. And so that's my next step. I want to narrate all my stories. I want to narrate other people's stories. I want to just use my voice to express literature even more than I've been doing before.
That's really cool. I've done, it's funny because my background was in theater. That's where I started. That's where I came into writing, was actually as an actor who then wanted to write my own plays. And then I was like, no, prose for me. Like, ditch the scripts. And so to hear that you're interested, that is good. And audiobooks are really fun to narrate and get into. And so it's exciting to hear that that's a place of interest for you. Did you grow up in Brampton, born and raised in Brampton, or I know you were here early?
I came to Brampton, I was probably 4th grade. Before that, I grew up in Jane and Finch. And so it was a big transition because when I lived in Jane and Finch, I saw a lot of kids who looked like me, and we were all having lots of fun. And then my parents drove me to Brampton, and we drove past farms and cows and stuff. And right, this would have been in the 80s, right? So really now when you look back, that's like, what, half an hour away, it's nothing, right? But then, back then to me, it just seemed like I was going out to the boonies. But then I met a bunch of nice kids, and then I enjoyed Brampton. Like growing up in Brampton, all my experiences that led to me becoming maybe a writer, becoming an adult, everything points to Brampton. Brampton is what raised me, right? So I love Brampton, and I will always claim Brampton. People say, where you're from? I say B-Town, every time. But what's B-Town? Brampton, right? So, yeah, I love Brampton, and yeah, Brampton raised me.
I want to open it up to some questions from the audience. And so if you have a question, you can just pop your hand up. I have 2 rules for question and answer time. 1, it must be a question. And 2, it can only be a question at a time. So if you have a question, just make sure it is a question. And just one at a time so we can get as many people in as possible. So these could be questions for Kevin. They could be questions for us as writers. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but this isn't about me, but just so that I'm not speaking and you're like, who are you? What do you bring to the table? I was born in Mississauga, moved to Brampton after university. I started the Festival of Literary Diversity while I was publishing my first books. I wrote a memoir about my dad called The Stone Thrower, and then a novel called Better Child. And now I have 3 children's books and a middle grade anthology as well. And so that's kind of where my background and experience is. So if I throw in an answer, that's where I'm coming from. Any questions? Yes.
Is there a pressure on writers now to produce audiobooks? It's interesting that you were talking about to start bringing that into your practice? And like just generally, with the rise of podcasts and things like that, is that something now that becomes an expectation, or I guess to both?
I don't think it's an expectation yet, but I do see the popularity. I see people, like I'm doing I'm part of a workshop happening next week on how it's an introduction to audiobooks, and it's with the Writers Union, and the Writers Union is doing this because they know that this is something popular. Like this is something people have been asking about, right? So it's not new, but there is a wave happening, right? So maybe along the way, maybe that pressure may come, but I think for myself, I always knew that I wanted to do audiobooks, right? Because I always want to narrate. For some other people I've talked to, they just would like to know that their stuff has been read by somebody else, right? That it can be on Audible, that it's another form of income, right? Another stream of income, right? Another way of their story being disseminated, right? Some people don't want to read, right? Like I didn't want to read, but some people want to listen. Everyone loves to listen to a story, right? It's not just for young children, right? So in that way, I think that's where the popularity is growing. Like people want to listen to stories on the go, right? They want to listen to a novel on the go, a self-help book on the go, right? While you're jogging, whatever. So then the convenience of it, I think, is what's helping it grow in that way.
Yeah, I think most traditionally published books are being turned into audiobooks at the same time now. And self-published authors, I think, are still a choice because there's an expense involved. But for a lot of publishers, it's built into your contract that it will be available as an ebook, as an audiobook, and as a paper or hardcover, whatever the agreement is. So it's pretty common. Yeah, and a lot of authors have to choose or get to choose if they narrate it or if someone else narrates it. Oftentimes you'll find with nonfiction, those get narrated by the author, so I did Stone Thrower. But then for other books, I prefer when the author doesn't read their fiction, to be honest. I'm a big audiobook listener, so I prefer when it's not the author, and I prefer even my own books to be narrated by somebody else. Yeah, there's a question there and a question here.
In the age of kind of generated AI kind of growing, how do you as an author protect your work?
Your thoughts on that? We do have a workshop at Full this week on AI technology. I don't know if this was a plant, but thank you. It's Monday, and with the virtual pass, you get access to that and many other virtual events.
I guess in terms of protecting my work, I'm not really sure how I can really protect it. Because if AI got a hold of my work and someone said, I want to write a book like heronJones, then it would just kind of copy what I'm doing and produce something original or semi-original, right? So I don't know if I can really protect against that so much. I have my copyright, but my copyright does not include my style, right? So that's kind of a difficult, and it's really a sticky thing that we're going through right now. And I see people like, oh, yeah, I just made a comic book. I just did it all the AI, I went into this program, did this, I put this, I said what I want, I put this word in, and it created a whole script for me, and then look, I'm an author, right? And so, and I was having this conversation with a publisher once, and they're saying that this is growing so large, like the AI system can go in and reproduce almost exactly, some of the great authors. But the problem is the AI doesn't have a soul, right? That emotion and that thing that drives us to write, that connects us with the readers, they can't do that yet. When they can, we're in a lot of trouble, right? But for now, I feel okay.
I think there's so many stresses in the world too. I kind of choose the ones that I let into my life. I'm like, that's too complicated for me. I will also say, I think there's AI. So I'm not personally worried about it. I don't think about it a lot. I think there are writers who are actually using it to their advantage. It's particularly helpful when you're dealing with copy. So you have to do like a description of your book. It's really helpful to have someone sort of give you a framework for the marketing language of the book. Not the creativity part of it, but the marketing language. And that's actually like quite useful because I hate writing that. So even when you're doing like a query letter, where you're putting information out, AI and ChatGPT can actually be helpful. And I think, I remember when I was in a publishing program and they were like, ebooks are going to destroy us, and then it was like, audiobooks are going to destroy us, and there's always this resistance and fear to things that are new, and I'm trying to live in a place where I say, like, well, how can I use it to my advantage? It's not going away. So what can I use that works for me, as opposed to, like, just shouting at the wind, like the man in the cloud or the Simpsons. Yeah. You had a question here.
Yes, I tried to book a consultation with you, but your time flies too well. So I was wondering if we can still, make appointments with you later on.
I'm going to intervene so that you don't have to do the awkward thing of being like, no, we can't. So he got paid for this work, which is important because he should get paid. And that job is kind of over. But there are going to be other opportunities at the library, at Hold, and I can share some examples of things that would be available to you. Kevin may, if you email him, would be nice, but that's just the way that the contract kind of works, right? So there's not going to be more slots that open up until the next writer president comes.
Talk about writing, deciding, and just maybe, because you talk about Brampton and James mentioned how these communities, neighborhoods are influencing your work and the writing that you do. So I'm really interested in writing neighborhood stories, and of course, there's all those three Scarborough novels that are killing it in every way.
Yeah.
But there's not a whole lot of stories where I know in it's almost set in Brampton.
There's portions that it's at, right?
Yeah. So I'm just curious, and I know your novel is set in Malton, so I'm just curious if you can talk about how you do that and make it, and why you choose to do it.
Yeah, so I want to incorporate my surroundings, my experiences in my stories. I always remember either watching or reading watching things on TV, movies, or reading things, and being like, wow, New York looks so cool, right? And I want to go to New York, and so I would go to New York and I would see the places that I read about or that I saw in movies and stuff. And I want that for younger readers to feel about where I grew up. I want them to see Brampton in that light. I want them to be like, oh wow, that's where Shoppers World was? Yeah, I read about that place. Oh, Brampton City Center? Yeah, so I want those things. And then I want the young people who read my books to feel empowered, to feel confident, like, that's where I grew up. You're talking about me, right? So I want it to hit home. I want everything to be very personal. And so that's why I try to incorporate my city and my surroundings in my books. I think that's very important to me.
It's so fascinating writing settings. So one of the things when you're writing a story, I think you kind of choose to center something. Sometimes it's very plot driven, a lot of times in mystery or romance. It's the plot that's driving the story, and the characters in the setting are sort of secondary. Sometimes the characters are the central figure, and that's where the attention goes. And then sometimes it's the place. It's the place where it happens. Brampton hasn't been written about a lot in books. Ian Williams, who I'm interviewing tomorrow at the library, had elements of Brampton in his book. Jane Igaharo, who writes romance novels. One of the novels that I read was set in Brampton, or had moments in Brampton as well. I knew someone was going to ask that. Sam, can you Google Jane's book? It's the first one, if you can find it.
What was the last name?
Igaharo, Igharo. I know, I swear, any librarians know the first one? I know, she has a bunch, but she's great, so read them all. But yeah, setting can be really fun. It's really complicated too. When you make the setting central, there's so much that goes into it. There's so much that even in places that you've lived, you have to kind of dig deep and figure out. One of the things that I said so complicated, I used to always say, I'm going to set a book in Brampton, I'm going to set a book in Canada, I'm going to represent. And one thing that makes it so hard for me as a writer is the seasons. It is so hard to deal with the seasons in a novel that goes beyond a year, because the seasons change everything. They're so dramatic. What you wear, how you feel. Like, I feel like it would be great to do a series where it's the same characters but in different seasons, because the mood, the reaction to things, it's so dramatic. You know, spring has this like lightness to it, this anticipation. Winter is just dread all the time, you know, and so it's so fascinating when you dig into setting, whether that's just the environment or the like place, the actual place that you live. I also know a lot of BIPOC writers tend to write, like to write in imagined places, and I think that's because we come from, or from other places that we've been, because we come from so many places. And then we have these ideas that are sort of not quite Canada and not quite the other place we're from. And well, I'm speaking myself when I wrote heronJones. I just kind of set it in this imagined world, and I know that's quite common as well. So it's really setting is a fascinating part of storytelling. And when you're writing a book, especially a novel, thinking about the setting is oftentimes like a beginning point, a starting point. That's going to influence the shape of your book, the length of your book, the characters in your book. So it's a great question, and I look forward to your Brampton novel, or Rexdale, or Scarborough, or you know, another put to fold. We're showing Brother on the last day of the festival, May 4th, at the Rose Theatre, which is a novel set in Scarborough that was turned into a movie. And we're showing the movie. There'll be popcorn. There'll be fun. And so I love, and we're talking to David Sherianji, the author, at the start of it. As a way to kind of, one of the questions I want to ask him is about setting, and about writing a place that's not written about often.
That's a good novel.
Sorry, was it the last one?
Name a bunch.
Okay, so With Love, Miss America is the last.
That's the last one.
Yep, The Sweetest Remedy, where we end and begin, and Ties That Tether.
I think it's Ties That Tether.
Those are set in Nigeria.
Oh, maybe that's not the one. I'll look at I have to look at my bookshelf. It's there. It's there. Oh, no, let's see.
So what is next for you both, actually? Anything new coming or anything, you know, working on?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question. It's like I know you or something. So up next, I've been promoting a new novel, which is actually set in Brampton. It's called Hacking Heartbreak, and it's about a young man who falls in love for the first time, and he doesn't realize, number one, he's a computer whiz. See, he's great with computers, and he hacks for fun. And so when he falls in love with this girl who doesn't really, she likes him, but she's not as, into it in the same way. And when he realizes this, he doesn't take it very well, and he decides to hack all her social media stuff, all her school accounts, and then wreaks havoc, and then the story goes from there. So it's called Hacking Heartbreak, right? And so that was supposed to come out earlier this year. We're still waiting for the launch. It's with Laura Mercer. You can always just look it up, Hacking Heartbreak by heronJones. So that should be coming out hopefully May 20th, I pray.
This year?
This year, yeah. It was supposed to come out February 20th. So, yeah. But that's the business sometimes. Yes.
So, what inspires your writing, and how do you stay connected to that inspiration?
Oh, wow, that's a very, very deep question. So, I'm inspired by really just anything that I see. And I have a habit now of just paying attention to everything and everybody. I listen to everyone's conversations. Like, I have like rabbit ears. So, people sitting behind me, I'm listening to what they're saying, and I listen, and then in my private time, then I try to copy down everything they were talking about, right? Because I want authentic dialogue. So these are things that are happening. When I see weird and things that strike my interest, I always pen them down. Either I'm writing them on my cell phone, or I used to carry a little tiny notepad, and I write these things down. These things are all inspiring to me. I know they're real seeds of life that I can actually transform into stories, or add them to stories that I have. So that's kind of my inspiration, like paying attention to life, right? And of course, the things that I'm going through, anything that I go through, things I see my family going through, the emotions that they're going through, right? Everyone has emotions. We all share emotions. So I really try to capture that human element in my writing so that I can express it in a way to tell my story. And so that's where I really try to find inspiration. What's the second part of it? Oh, how I stay connected to it. Stay connected to it. I don't do anything really specific to stay connected to it. I feel it's just a part of me. So that inspiration is always there, and I try to write daily, right? It's not always easy. I know a lot of writers, they say, oh, I just write when I'm inspired, and that might be once a month, might turn into once a year, right? And so I've got myself in a habit of trying to write every day. I had read Walter Mosley and Stephen King, and they both were saying, yes, you should write. You want to be a writer? You should be writing for 5 hours a day, right? And now, that is great, but some of us have full-time jobs, right? Some of us have full-time families, right? So it's hard to find that. But if you can find an hour in the day, I would write every morning before work. So I'll get up a little early, about 5 o'clock, 5:30, put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, write for an hour, then start work. And I would try to do that every day. If I couldn't do that, I would give myself a 10-minute time limit, and I would just write as much as I can in 10 minutes, and then put it away, right? So at least I'm doing something. That way, the well never runs dry. I'm always feeling inspired and always ready to write. And so no matter what I'm going to write, I can still feel confident to do it. Even if it's not going to be very good writing, it's still writing, and you still good. Every practice is good practice, right? That's why I come from an athletic background, and I've had bad days on the basketball court, but I've never had bad basketball. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the way I kind of look at it.
I think for me, curiosity, it's always a question, something I can't quite get over, something I'm wrestling with, and that's whether it's a memoir or a novel. It's like a question I'm working on. So, Gutter Child was like that, and I'm currently working on the sequel to Gutter Child. Who knows when that will be done? That's been working on, but something I've been living in Florida for a lot of the year with my son in high school, and I've been working on a series about the neighborhood that we're in and kind of the questions I have in this particular political climate of the relationship between Canadians and Americans and these neighborhoods that are almost like dystopias in terms of their like weird rules and subcultures. I'm super fascinated by it, and I think what's most exciting about writing is when you're like inspired by your own curiosity. That's when you have the most fun writing. I think when I come to the end of the book, my goal is to kind of come to some kind of resolution about something. Oh, and the Jane book was Ties That Tether. It's about a girl, a Nigerian woman who's dating a guy her mother doesn't approve of. And so I think her mother lives in Brampton and the rest of the story is in Etobicoke or vice versa. So she's sort of going back and forth between these neighborhoods, dating this guy. So. Any other questions?
Well, I should look at this.
Sure. Yes. I love these.
So I was looking through the little thing here. So do we just like pick and choose whichever ones we want to attend?
Mm-hmm. So virtual is a pass. So if you want to attend the virtual events, you get a pass, and then you can go to all the virtual events. That's sort of included together. And then in person are individual tickets. So you can look at it and be like, I want to go to that one doesn't interest me, and just buy the ticket for the one that you're most interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And there is a Brampton Library code. I don't know what it is. We will figure it out before you leave. If you want to register for something, it's 10% off, and so make sure you have that, and we can discount on your passes or tickets.
Come find me at the end.
Yes. I'm putting Sam on the spot. Find out about Jamie tomorrow. Get the codes. So glad you're here, Sam. Yes. Kevin, do you do editing?
I do,
As
yes.
a profession?
I was doing it as a profession for a good while. For maybe about 7 to 10 years, I was editing other writers' works, which was, I would say, was fun. Not really fun. Because editing is really tedious work. And I found that I was really inspired because I had stopped writing for myself for a little bit of time. And so I had lots of time to edit. And so I was editing a lot of people's work. And as I was editing, I was becoming inspired to write again. And then when I realized that, okay, I want to do more writing, it meant that I didn't have the time to edit. Right? So I guess I am an editor, but I haven't been editing for the last year and a half, 2 years. Right? Because I've been trying to really focus on my creative writing. But editing is very important, and if you're going to be a writer, especially if you're going to self-publish, I really recommend hiring an editor. It's expensive sometimes. It really is expensive. I have to give people discounts all the time because they have a lot of money. They just want to self-publish, and they're going to spend a lot of money with the printing and doing everything else, right? So I used to have to give people discounts all the time, but if you can hire a writer hire an editor, it's going to be worth your while.
There's an organization called Editors Canada, and you can find editors there. If you want to become an editor, you can go there. An event at the Fold that we have on Sunday is the Writers Hub, and you can actually go onto different tables, go into different Zoom calls with different publishing professionals, and one of them is Editors Canada, and just ask them the questions that you want to ask them.
Nice.
It's a really cool opportunity. I will say one of the things that will change your writing and your experience in writing is becoming a good self-editor. Like understanding what makes for a good story, understanding how to edit your own work, whether you self-publish or traditionally publish, building that skill in yourself will save you time and money. And it will also improve the readability of your work. That's really what you're working on when you're self-editing. How will this read to someone that isn't carrying the story around in their head? And so the more you can figure out the difference between you writing and you looking at it from a reader's perspective, and the more you can develop a skill or strategies for making your writing more clear, more concise, more readable, the more time you'll save. It's been something I've been working on a lot. I've had an editor for all of my books. But I try and utilize them less and less so that they're just reading at certain points in the book and not kind of having to guide my whole project.
Is there an advantage between self-publish versus like non-self-publish?
I mean, Kevin can speak from the perspective of having done both. I can speak to it from the perspective of working in both, like from an administrative level, right? I hire authors for the festival, traditionally published versus self-published. What I'll say in traditionally published, there are two different major categories. There's multinationals and then independent publishers. Your multinationals are your Penguin Random Houses, your HarperCollins, your Simon & Schuster, and they are huge. If you get in with them, people are very excited, it's very prestigious and awesome, but it's also a massive machine in which you're like this big. So there's disadvantages in that, and people often only focus on the advantages. Small presses, so places you might not have heard of, but that make amazing books that have won awards, ECW Press, Coach House Press, Dundurn, they're all across Canada, and they get funding from the government. And so they tend to be more accessible. You can get in earlier with them. Like when you're early in your career in particular, they tend to have a little bit more focus on you. But they don't have the reach sometimes when it comes to marketing. And then when you're self-publishing, it's a whole different machine with all kinds of advantages. You're in control of everything, but you're also paying for everything. So that's the kind of thing that you have to weigh, and it's a really tough decision for some, whether you lean into one or the other, or you kind of go back and forth to both. It can depend on the project, it can depend on the genre that you're writing, it can depend on a whole bunch of things, but really it's about figuring out your personality and what might work best for your ultimate goals for your book and the personality that you have. I was not built to self-publish because I am like this. When my books come out, I am like afraid, I am nervous, I cannot go into a chapter and sit at a table and be like, have you read my book? Here's my book, here's what you need to know about it. And a lot of self-published authors, they travel around, they hustle, they work, and they're incredible. And I just knew I didn't have that in me. And there's some, so that's just my sort of why I went that route. One of my colleagues self-publishes and she swears by it, loves it, like into the culture, give me more of it. And not really interested in traditionally publishing, and if she does, like only under very specific conditions. So that's kind of the very long answer to what might have been your question. I'm not even sure it's your question anymore. Kevin, save me.
I'll jump in there. So, self-publishing, what I found, yes, the word is hustle, like that's in big block letters, hustle, when it comes to self-publishing. But you have all the control, which is a great thing. You're making all the decisions, so that's a great benefit to you. You have to pay for everything. It means you have to organize everything, right? You have to come up with editing yourself. You got to be able to come up with the distribution yourself, the marketing. You got to plan everything out. You have to plan your launch dates, organize your launch part, like everything you have to do. And if you're that type of person who's a self-starter, then yes, I would suggest yes, do it, right? Because
It's faster.
it's faster, right? You call the shots, and you recoup pretty much all the money. Whatever you've invested in, you're going to get it back, right? Now, how fast you get it back depends on how hard you hustle, right? Whereas if you're going to go through the traditional publishers, they're going to pay you. They're probably going to give you an advance, which is really nice.
Or at the very least, you don't have to give them anyway.
If you're with a traditional
Yeah,
publisher.
yeah.